Everything trail. Subscribe.
Hi everyone, Fantano here, the internet's busiest music nerd. And it's time for a review of the new Wale album. Album about nothing. Wale is a lyricist, a rapper hailing from DC who showed quite a bit of creativity in the mid and late 2000s when he was dropping a lot of mixtapes, but the charm that would come through on some of these free projects never quite, for me anyway, translated onto his commercial records, which is a pretty common problem in hip-hop music, although it seems to be kind of decreasing because we have a lot of mixtapes out there that really are quality albums, except they're being given away for free, and we have other artists out there that are taking their mixtapes and selling them commercially. Regardless, enjoying Wale's commercial projects, for me anyway, has not been easy, especially since he was suddenly scooped up by Rick Ross's Maybach Music Group. The first record he actually ended up dropping on the label was the album Ambition, an album that, in my opinion, really showed anything but ambition. The only thing this album really strived for was to be an incredibly middle-of-the-road pop rap album. A project that was so disappointing I completely tuned out Wale's next one, but this new album over here caught my eye, mostly because of its cover and its title, which is not just a reference to a fantastic TV show, but also a reference to one of Wale's earliest and most celebrated mixtapes. Would he come through with a commercial project that actually goes back to that, I guess, older, younger hunger and creativity he was displaying in his early work? Maybe with more ambition and a bigger sound, given that you have a larger budget on an MMG album. And one part of that assumption is correct, because this album certainly sounds expensive. A lot of the beats on this LP are pretty spacey, or they are grand and illustrious, a lot like the opening track on here, which features some really fantastic, nimble pianos, some very bright and very upbeat background vocals. The kind of jazzy combination of pianos and vocals on this beat reminds me a little bit of something that could have been on the Chance the Rapper Acid Rap mixtape. The instrumentals, for the most part, on this LP are pretty impressive. Doesn't sound like there's a whole lot of sampling, and maybe even some live instrumentation thrown into the mix on a handful of these tracks. Again, kind of sounds expensive. And let's not forget the multitude of vocal clips on this record from either Jerry Seinfeld just either talking or talking to Wale, or clips of Seinfeld's hit TV show, Seinfeld, which run throughout this album and don't really feel like they're placed randomly or anything like that. It feels like a lot of the time Wale is pulling song idea inspiration from these clips, from Jerry talking or just his show, whether it be on the song White Shoes, where we're hearing about vanity and materialism, or we have George talking about the appeal of hopelessness, or we have Jerry talking about later in the album how people love to, talk. We do. And this is a pretty creative idea, not just for a rap album, but for any album, really, for an artist to kind of base the concepts of the songs around a really great TV show. I mean, I think there are very few shows you could actually do that with other than Seinfeld, because there are so many episodes that touch down on so many different things in a funny and unique way. And given recent releases, this album is actually hilarious for another reason, mostly because I kind of feel like the Kendrick Tupac dynamic on To Pimp a Butterfly is a lot like the Wale Seinfeld dynamic on this record. Wale is talking to Seinfeld as if, he's got this boundless knowledge. And, I'm not talking shit about Jerry Seinfeld. I mean, for sure, he's been in the industry so long and he's been so successful. I'm sure he's learned a thing or two. I'm just saying it's a kind of funny inclusion. And I think in a way it was inspired for Wale to incorporate such heavy Seinfeld themes on this record. But this album's inspiration, for me, kind of stops there. Well, not quite there. I mean, I do like the instrumentals on this record for the most part. There are very slow, syrupy, sub-bass heavy bangers in the track list here. Beats that kind of feel really dreamy, like a fusion of cloud rap and trap music. Or we're getting tracks on here that are a little more lively and feature a lot of jazzy instrumentation. Keys, horns, background vocals. And a lot of the instrumentals here either feature a very heavy dose of reverb, of atmosphere, or they're just generally smooth in sound and in tone. Even with some of the beats on here having some pretty punchy percussion or even lively vocals, like on the song The Bloom, which features a very strong, peppy soul flavor. Most of the time, I feel like when I'm listening to this album, I'm in a bit of a dream state. And it's a dream state that I actually wish Wale's rapping and his delivery woke me up from, at least occasionally. From his flow to his lyrics, this is just another project for me from Wale that doesn't really do all that much for me. Outside of a few bars here and there, there's one part where Wale says on this album that DC means don't come. A kind of funny moment, but most of the time on this record, Wale isn't particularly bad, but he's not particularly great either. There are a load of tracks on the first half of this LP where we're getting just these ambient raps about him making music or just his place in hip-hop as a genre, although there are moments on here like The Pessimist where I do give Wale kudos for tossing in some politically charged and kind of socially aware lyrics referencing some pretty dark and intense current events. And maybe if Wale kind of just stuck to these two things, this LP could have been decent, but he does one other thing on this record, something he didn't do quite as much on Ambition. He sings. He sings quite a bit on numerous tracks. And as far as I know, Wale isn't really known for being a fantastic singer or anything like that. And when he does sing on this album, a lot of the time it just kind of ends up as this semi-tone deaf moaning that reminds me a lot of like some of Kid Cudi's worst tracks. Like on The White Shoes, where Wale is off-key, hard, or The Glass Egg, or The God Smile, which are equally unpleasant in some respects, or the track The Middle Finger, where the hook on the song is literally, "Fuck, you leave me alone." At that point, I wish I could have, but there were still 9 more tracks. So we have Wale giving this plain delivery a lot of the time, or he is singing off key, or he is maybe sounding a little aggressive, a little hard, kind of like a young, hungry J. Cole, or he is getting a little goofy, like on the track The Girl's on Drugs, where he's kind of given this deep, sort of chest-pumping, worst behavior-ish rap voice. He's really on his Drake shit with this track, especially how he goes from this deep-voiced delivery to this soft croon on the chorus. In the middle of the track list here, we have the very druggy slow jam One Time in Houston, where the forgettability of this album is essentially just brought down to a lower BPM. Thankfully, SZA shows up out of nowhere to deliver some decent singing on The Need to Know, but when Wale steps up to rap, he sounds kinda half asleep. Kinda like he just had sex, which is fitting because this track is about friends with benefits, and it could have been decent, but just out of nowhere. Just more Seinfeld clips. More Seinfeld clips. I like the simple beat on this thing and the acoustic guitar too, but with the Seinfeld, there's too much of a good thing. I mean, the point was already made with the Seinfeld clip at the beginning of the track. The point did not need to be made further. I'm really kind of tired of hearing it by the end of the record, even with the track Matrimony, where Jerry talking on the song actually makes a really smart and poignant observation, comparing marriage and just sort of relationships and that point of marriage to the drop in a roller coaster. Not that the quality of the relationship drops necessarily, but that's where things kind of get a little intense. And how there are some big life events like marriage that no matter how much you prepare for them, you're never quite 100% ready. And I love Usher's appearance on this track too. And the instrumental, again, it's a beautiful instrumental. Another beautiful instrumental on this record. Rack one up for the producers on this album. But this track, what Wale says, what he raps on this song just seems so unfitting given that we just had a Friends with Benefits track just a few tracks ago. And also with the theme of the hook and the theme of Jerry and the theme of the song. Wale is actually rapping about just this inability or this fear to commit with his music and his lifestyle and his career kind of getting in the way in a sense, and maybe just this attraction and this ability for him to attain multiple women given where he is in life right now. But he kind of comes to the conclusion later in the song that he needs to settle down eventually. Wow. To be that young woman that Wale settles for. So lucky. Meanwhile, the closing track on this thing is kind of like this really failed attempt at trying to be sexy with Jeremiah singing on the hook here. As soon as SZA comes in, this album just goes full pop rap R&B fusion, which again is fine, but for a record that tries to be so thematic and conceptual, especially at its start, it kind of falls apart completely at its finish. Which I understand, how much conceptuality can you be expecting from an album about nothing? But that's not literally what this is. I mean, it's just a reference. Because Wale definitely tried to make this record about himself, money, love, and a multitude of other things, but he's just so uninteresting. And the singing. Oh, the singing. So, I mean, yeah, just another Wale project completely lost on me. I'm feeling a light to decent 4 on this thing. Transition.
Everything trail. Subscribe.